And today I have with me Dr. Sean O'Mara, and he is going to tell us some amazing things: how to be more healthy, how to regenerate our bodies, how to be the healthiest and most fit we can possibly be. Interesting. I have so many exciting things I want to bounce back and forth with you. So if today we can discuss how vegans and vegetarians could accomplish what it is that you're teaching. I know it's not your usual direction, but I would just love to bounce it back and forth with you.
I don't want to take credit. I've had a lot of contributions from other people. The truth is, we know how to reverse chronic disease, and it begins with identifying the correct metrics for eliminating chronic disease in your life and understanding the strategies to make sure that those metrics are changing for the better. I'm happy to segue, if you'd like, into one of those specific metrics, visceral fat, and talk about it in the context of vegans and carnivores. So
I think 1.5 billion, according to the research I did, vegetarians, 300 million more vegans on the planet. There's a lot of people who it would really benefit to help see your perspective as you look actually into the tissues of the bodies.
yeah, so what I'll do is maybe first, by way of introduction to this biomarker, just show this graphic to help illustrate what we're going to take a look at. So we're going to use an MRI scanner to scan through an abdomen. I'm going to show you an image of a vegan who's been eating vegan and somebody who's been eating carnivore. Okay, so they're just example of one person. They very closely follow the anecdotal experience that I've had now for over 10 years doing MRI imaging on vegans and carnivores. So typically they're fairly representative. So when you do a scan through the abdomen, it creates an image like this in black and white. Fat shows up on an MRI as white. So wherever you see white on an MRI scan here, it's going to be a type of fat. And there are several types of fat, and some fat is good and some fat is bad. But for the average person, nobody really knows that. They just think, lump it all together, fat is bad. But you want to have two types of fat. They're associated with longevity and improved health and improved quality living. And then there's four types of fat that just do the opposite. They're associated with disease and declining health and declining lifespan. So on an MRI, muscle shows up as dark. So the dark structures on the sides are your muscles. These are muscles in the back. This is your vertebral body, and these two are your psoas muscles, which make up your core. And I like to point out the core because core is something a lot of people do when they work out. And in case you ever wonder what the heck is hurting so bad when you're doing a core workout, it's these two little buggers right there. And they're really important, as it turns out, and it gives me a great barometer on how healthy somebody is looking at those particular muscles inside, which, by the way, you never get to see unless you're a surgeon or you're a physician who's doing an MRI CT scanner. So the rest of this white stuff inside is the deadly stuff called visceral fat. And that was the first biomarker that we came up with. And it was actually discovered or shared with me first by a researcher, an MD PhD researcher named Dr. Zhang. And this was his very first MRI on himself. And so he's got a thin layer of fat on his outside, a lot of fat on the inside. So he's in fact a TOFI, thin outside, fat inside. And the way he found out about this visceral fat is he was studying people's backs. So he was looking at back pathology, and he noticed people that had the worst backs have the most amount of white stuff inside of them. And the people that had the healthiest backs had the least amount of white stuff inside of them. So he saw this early on, a relationship and association between visceral fat and back disease. And then as he explored it more, he realized that it was associated with virtually all forms of chronic disease. And in fact, we went on to apply for a grant and earned a grant from the National Science Foundation. We were awarded a grant to study visceral fat and chronic disease. And we saw that in 6,000 people that we scanned their abdomens, that every self-reported form of chronic disease in those 6,000 Americans got either better or went away as they eliminated visceral fat. No other marker in the history of humanity will improve a human being more and get rid of disease than getting rid of visceral fat. And that's the strongest point I'd like to leave with your audience that they really want to understand. This is visceral fat, and then this is fat in the muscle called myosteatosis or human marbling. So most people listening today are familiar with marbleization of a steak. Well, you can get marbleization of your own muscles, including your back muscles. And when they start to get marbleized like that, they stop working so good. So when your muscles don't work so good in your arms, you may not be able to carry groceries as well. So as you get older, you get weaker, and two things happen. Your muscles stop performing as well, so they're weaker, and they don't move as well, so they're not as coordinated. And the other thing that happens is they shrink. So they literally lose mass. So your muscles get smaller. So as you see white, you'll see less dark. Literally, the white stuff makes the dark stuff go away. But it's this subcutaneous fat that I want to concentrate on here and tell you about. There's a black line going between this subcutaneous fat, separating it into two compartments. One is deep subcutaneous fat, and the other one is superficial subcutaneous fat. Superficial because it's closer to the skin, deep because it's closer to the muscle. These two types of subcutaneous fat are like bricks and clouds difference. The deep subcutaneous fat is associated with disease and death and deteriorating your quality of life, just like visceral fat and just like myosteatosis, muscle fat, because they all secrete inflammatory substances that go and destroy tissue. Superficial subcutaneous fat right here is beneficial. It secretes a molecule called adiponectin, adiponectin. Adiponectin is associated with preventing heart attacks, strokes, cancer, chronic disease, fatty liver disease. It's beneficial. So it's a type of fat that you want. But oddly enough, a lot of people are doing liposuction to get rid of it. And they've reported to me when they've done that, they've regretted it because it affects their health. Because they didn't know that. They don't tell you when you get that sucked out of you, but it does affect your health, and it affects the appearance of your face. So many women that get liposuction have reported their faces have become less attractive. Now, what that means to me as a researcher is they have become less healthy because they've lost this depot, this collection of beneficial fat that produces this molecule. Another beneficial fat is brown adipose tissue or brown fat. And brown adipose tissue is aligned with better metabolism and better functioning mitochondria. So you want to get rid of visceral fat, you want to get rid of deep subcutaneous fat, you want to get rid of muscle fat, human marbling. And the fourth fat that maybe we'll show you a picture of is fat around the heart or fat inside organs. And that can happen too. So
that fat that somebody would have removed with liposuction, can they restore that, or is that not restorable?
Well, it can be restored through lifestyle. So if you've had liposuction, then you want to correct your lifestyle. And there's no one tip that's like, tell you to eat grass-fed beef and you're going to develop subcutaneous fat or something like that. It's really a lifestyle. Okay. We have noticed that in the strategies that eliminate visceral fat, it paradoxically allows you to put on subcutaneous fat. Beautiful. So our strategies that eliminate the dangerous fat cause good fat to go on. And that's a good thing. So we're happy about that. We don't have to do extra things to get people to get that.
Very nice. And what was it you call the person who's thin but has fat inside? Because I would say that was probably my husband over many years.
Tofu.
Tofu.
Yeah, and very often they're kind of long-term vegans. So we see a lot of long-term vegans losing their subcutaneous fat. If you look at like Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. Caldwell or Dr. McDonough, Al Sharpton, these people lose a lot of their subcutaneous fat. Their skin becomes very thin, and they get accelerated sarcopenia. So sarcopenia is the loss of muscle tissue. And so a good example of sarcopenia is the small muscles here compared to the large muscles here. This is largely a vegetarian who eats a lot of rice and a lot of bread. So they will, in fact, eat a lot of processed foods.
Wow.
This gentleman from Bangladesh has a large amount of visceral fat in them. You see mostly white. And when you see a large amount of white, you'll see a small amount of dark. The white shrinks the dark. It literally is causing atrophy and loss of muscle tissue.
Wow.
And in the absence of a lot of white, when you see a lot of dark, you see big muscles. So on an MRI, organs and muscle and bone show up as dark. So when you have an MRI, you want to be mostly dark. You want to have an oval shape like you did when you were 16. And you want to not have a dad bod like this guy who has a very large sagittal abdominal diameter. The diameter of their abdomen and the sagittal plane, which is from their belly button to their back, is enlarged. And that is either when they lay down or when they stand up. And you will see this in older guys and older women. They'll have this pooch. And their organs literally in their upper abdomen start sagging down. They get this belly protruding, and it's oftentimes called the dad bod or a beer gut in males. And then women like to think it's from childbirth. But heads up, if you've never had babies, you still get this. And there are a lot of women that have flat abdomens who have had babies and don't get this. And it really turns on this inflammatory fat, destroying your tissues inside your abdomen. So you really don't know unless you get scanned how much of this inflammatory fat you have in here. But
what do you think about somebody who's been a vegan who has not eaten much grain? I kind of come from a culture where we ran these living food institutes and it was more salads, nuts, seeds, but a lot of fruit. And I think fruit is also the downfall of it. And I also went through long periods of time being 50 years vegan, vegetarian, varied, but where I felt really protein hungry. And I knew that I was doing a lot of athletic things, but I'm wondering if you think the same visceral fat would show up in somebody who didn't eat a lot of grains or heavy carbs or refined foods.
Yes, we still would see elevated amounts of visceral fat. Everybody is a little different, so it's kind of hard to lump them in. Your question, though, is worthy of further investigation. Right. I don't have as many of those vegans that would eat just vegetables and fruit, rather than most vegans eat a lot of grains. But the ones that still do are tofu. So if you are eating more living, vegetables and fruit, and you don't eat grains and maybe processed food as much, you still have that visceral fat, and you still have a paucity of the superficial subcutaneous fat. If you're a vegetarian or a vegan, get an MRI and see where you're at. So, it doesn't matter so much where you're at today, it's where you're going to be in 3 months. Did you get better or did you get worse? And if you're getting worse, you need a course correction. You need to change your dietary strategies and your life. You can't read an MRI scan across borders. We'll be expanding to Arizona, Texas, California, New York, hopefully over the next year, and over the next 6 months, Florida, St. Louis, Missouri, and Chicago, Illinois. So we're growing as awareness of visceral fat is starting to take off, and people are recognizing that, it's a short conversation when they go in and talk to their doctor about visceral fat, because he or she, the physician, just doesn't know anything about visceral fat. And they're, because of that, they're reluctant to do an MRI scan on something they don't know about. And, it's not just a physician, it's also the physician radiologist. If you look at the scan, let me just sum it up. What is the largest part of the abdomen here? For $1 million, Carrie, we'll pretend. What is the largest part of the abdomen?
It's visceral fat.
Yeah. And radiologists don't read it. They're not trained in it. And they don't even look at it. They can't read the most obvious thing that's destroying humanity.
Wow.
That's the enormity of the problem. So if you're fortunate enough to have tuned into this podcast today, you've got a really good anecdotal experience, just how big of a problem it is It's not taught in medical schools. It's not taught in radiology residency programs. No physicians know about visceral fat and can read about it. We probably have, I'm guessing, close to 1 million physicians in the world. And there's only 2 reading this? And find out what's going on in you, not other people. Don't follow dogma that you just have to eat meat or just eat plants and vegetables. You need to follow what is going on inside your body. It doesn't matter if the 7.9 billion people are all right if it's wrong for you. And so you should be looking at what's going on. Everybody has their own different microbiome, the collection of microbes inside of them, which really governs whether you get visceral fat, myosteatosis, deep subcutaneous fat, or superficial subcutaneous fat.
So let me ask you, do you think that, I know you're really big on carnivore, you know, ruminant animals and that kind of thing. Do you think a vegetarian can shift their visceral fat with fish consumption because it's a 0 carb food and enough fats along with that, which might be butter, olive oil?
Yeah, so I'll pull up an MRI of a vegan in just a minute. So this guy eats carnivore. This guy eats mostly vegetarian. He's not really vegan, but mostly vegetarian and grain heavy. So these pretty typical. I have yet to see a vegetarian, a vegan, who was not substantially filled with visceral fat. I'm not saying that they're not out there. It's just that they haven't come to me, and everybody, including one physician who came to me, and I scanned him, and I remember saying to him, well, we'll take a look and we can quantify how much visceral fat you have in you. And he said to me, oh, well, Dr. O'Mara, you're not going to see visceral fat in me. I have been vegan for 35 years.
Right.
And of course, he's filled with visceral fat. When we scan him, he has close to 10 pounds of it inside of him. And his response in his 70s, after being vegan for 35 years, was looking at all the visceral fat inside of him and how deceived he was to immediately go out and start eating meat. So the MRI ends the lie that you've been telling yourself and believing that you're not as healthy as you think you are. So let's look at this one vegan. And by the way, I love vegans and I have vegan clients. I have vegetarian clients. These are wonderful people that are principled and they do not want to eat meat. I do not fault them. People have their own beliefs about how they want to eat, how they want to live their lives. I just give them the tools to get insights into what they should do to biologically optimize within their value system. So if they want to be vegan, like this guy right here, and I'll show you his MRI scan so we take a look. His MRI scan is right here. So he's got a large amount of visceral fat and small amount of muscles. So this vegan came to me. He's actually a true vegan from India. So he's a Hindu. We got him scanned and we showed him all this visceral fat. Now, because he was honest, he admitted, I'm eating a lot of bread, I'm eating muffins, I'm even eating donuts, so he was eating some unhealthy processed foods. So what did we do for him is we got him to first see how much visceral fat he had inside all that disease, and we got him to stop eating the processed foods because it's processed carbohydrates that are worse than regular carbohydrates. It's processed meat that is worse than regular meat. Anything that's processed that's not naturally processed. And what do I mean by natural, by processed at the hands of humans? Okay, when the humans change the form, mooey maw, badness, bad stuff. But when nature changes the form, like fermentation, it makes the food better. So if you're gonna, any processing has to be at the hands of nature. So nature makes things better, not humans. So let's take a look at this vegan, what happened to him on an outward perspective. So this is his face, and maybe I can blow it up right there to get a sense. This was his face when we did his MRI scan. So it's his name is VJ, such a nice man.
Wow.
From India. So very inflamed face. And then as within about 3 months, he's substantially improved his face that much. Now look how much nicer he looks, because he's eliminated so much visceral fat that inflammation of his face is being removed.
Now, did he start eating meat, or is this just reducing processed
foods?
He's
staying vegan. He's just cutting out the processed carbohydrates. So I told VJ, cut out the processed carbohydrates, eat carbohydrates more in complex form. And then this is critical: consume fermented foods when you're eating those carbohydrates. And one of the worst things you can do today is be eating carbohydrates, especially processed carbohydrates, without ferments. So my honest recommendation is cutting out carbs, especially carbohydrates, adopting a more meat-centric diet, which is concentrating on protein and fat, something like keto or carnivore, and then cutting out carbohydrates. So VJ, we got him to cut out the processed carbohydrates, to eat complex carbohydrates, vegetables in whole form, and to incorporate fermented foods like kimchi, kvass, curdito, sauerkraut, living, probiotic, fermented, cultured, live food. And so you can see his face is substantially improved. But look at his abdomen too, Terry. It's very large abdomen here. Yeah. And now how much his abdomen is slimmed down.
Beautiful, and
he continues to improve. So I'll be doing his repeat MRI scan hopefully fairly soon. It's a little bit more complicated in India than it is in the United States, but I'm excited to be able to go onto social media and just share from the inside how much VJ is improving himself from the outside.
Beautiful. You know, an interesting thing that happened with me when I went keto a little over a year ago which was fish and vegetables. Basically, we got rid of everything in our kitchen that was not, on the list of really pure keto. And I began losing age spots on my arms. I wish I had pictures of them, but having been this long-term vegan vegetarian, I had these brown age spots appearing, and I was like, no, this is not right. This shouldn't be happening. What is going on? And when I started adding protein and fat and really low carb, I mean, they've all disappeared. It's incredible. I'm so excited,
Yeah. Well, it really is a reflection. And it's pretty common. People reporting that anecdotally as they're introducing and maintaining a diet, a meat-centric diet. And it's not just any meat, but you want to eat the healthiest meat possible, that they're seeing improvements in their skin and their body all over pretty consistently. So what I like to say is the more attractive a human being is, the healthier they are. Yes. Do you know why babies are so cute?
Because they're pure.
They're not pretty. They are cute because they're so healthy. Yes. Our brains tell us they're cute, but reality is they don't have any disease.
Right.
They are so attractive. You just want to stay near them, look at them, cuddle, touch them, have interaction with them, because they're that healthy. And then as we age, we lose our cuteness, we lose our attraction, because not from our age, but from the accumulation of disease, largely fueled by these inflammatory fat depots: visceral fat, deep subcutaneous fat, muscle fat, a face, because our faces tell the story of our health. So yes, I'd like to show a picture of my face at the time I learned about this, of how inflamed my face was at the age of 48. And by the way, I weighed less at that time, 165. So today, at the weight of 100, I'm closer to 180 right now, but 178 when this photograph was taken, you can see the considerable change in my face. And I continue to see it. So, get your body in better shape. Well, you can get your face in better shape. My face will never look like a 16-year-old again. But what is happening is the shape of my face is resembling the shape of a 16-year-old, because I'm eliminating those fat depots, which are also in the face. When we scan down on an MRI, we can see these fat depots, buccal fat pads and fat pads up in the temple areas that are filling the face with this inflammatory fat and causing an unattractive look. And
that is fabulous. How long did it take you to go through that much? I mean, obviously this is a 10-year difference, but how long did it take you to go through a really dramatic change? And did you start keto, paleo, carnivore? How did you start?
A series of those photographs in myself over a period of time. So here I am in my 20s.
Right.
And this is me in my 40s. And then you can see I'm developing inflammation here, maximum amount of visceral fat now at the age 48. And so it's a slow progression. And people see this. I mean, if you get your photographs out, you will notice by the time you get to your 40s, you're just not as attractive looking. Now, when I was this guy here walking around, I had girls that would look at me. I was kind of used to it. I mean, I was a typical vain young man.
Right.
So I'd walk around the beach or a shopping mall, and I liked seeing girls checking me out. Now, girls check out guys the way guys check out girls. We look into their eyes. And when we see an attractive female, we linger, we stay there. And girls were lingering on my face. But by the time I got to this point here and I'm walking around and I'm in a shopping mall, women would look right at me and look right away. I never saw that in my lifetime. I was used to the lingering look of a female that lingered, you know, on my eyes, my face. And my feelings were hurt. I'm a 48-year-old former cop, undercover drug agent, and now I got these women who won't look at me. You know, they look right away like I'm a really ugly dude. It's not that I'm ugly, it's just I'm diseased. And their biological brain says, this guy can't help me live better. But as I got rid of my visceral fat, my face starts to get in shape, and you can see the difference here. Now, I'm no, statue to David here, but I do have a better shape, a more oval shape. And then look at this, so the period from here to here is 5 years. And then it's another 3 years. And then it's another 4 years to get from here to here. But you can see that my face shape is changing. My appearance on my face is improving. It's time, if you're listening, and it's time the whole country hears, you should be improving with your age. You should be becoming more attractive.
Yes.
You don't have to buy looking worse as you age. That's what big healthcare, big pharma wants you to believe. You're just supposed to be falling apart, taking more pills. No, you should be becoming more attractive. So what happens now? I mean, I'm married, no good, and anymore. I've got a loving family, and and a loving relationship with my wife. But now when I walk down the mall, I'm looking at other people's faces, doing assessments on visceral fat, and I see women looking at me. And they linger, they stay on me, they look at my face. And I imagine that they're saying, gosh, I wish my husband looked like that. I wish somebody else looked like that. So I'm back to getting those lingering looks again. And it really comes down to this. It's because I have the same levels of visceral fat that I have here as an attractive young man, I have today as a 60-year-old guy. And, I look, younger people pay attention to me. It's very interesting. Kids used to be kind of afraid of me when I was like here. Kids are kind of stranger. Kids look at me, stranger kids, they start smiling at me because their little brain said, this guy lives well. And their little brain says, this is a good human being. So I like to tell my older clients that you can be a better influencer for your children and your grandchildren, the healthier you are. And if you run a company, you're a social media influencer, you can be a better influencer the healthier you are, getting rid of that visceral fat.
So, Dr. Sean, I'd like to know, what were your steps in those bottom 3 pictures? What did you go to first and second and third? And then give us guidelines. And I'd like to get into talking about fasting, about intermittent fasting. But the guidelines for eating, like what in your mind lets you see this return from visceral fat to the change?
Okay.
Human now.